5:30 News.
A story that gripped Montana and the nation for months. Tonight we're taking a look back at the Freeman saga through the eyes of some of the former and current Q2 journalists who covered it. Plus, the Senate endorses a bill forbidding vaccination discrimination. We'll have the details. But first, Billings Mayor Bill Cole has been in charge for more than 3 years. Now he's hoping to stay in charge as he announces his bid for re-election today. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Mayor Bill Cole making that official on the county courthouse lawn this morning. Cole's been the mayor of Billings since 2018 and is hoping to hang on to that position. Q2's Shaquille Cozart has more on the mayor's announcement and what he hopes to focus on if re-elected.
Mayor Bill Cole announced this afternoon that he will be running for mayor in the upcoming election. He said that one of the most important topics on his agenda is that people in the community still take COVID-19 seriously.
I filed my application to run again for mayor in Billings, Montana.
During his speech, Cole spoke of the toll the pandemic has taken, with 3 million lives lost worldwide, almost 600,000 in the United States, and 262 right here in Yellowstone County. He credits community members for their efforts to keep case numbers and deaths as low as possible.
The reality is those numbers could have been even higher. I offer my condolences to everyone who has lost someone in this pandemic. Someone like I have, my sister-in-law, Joy.
Cole said that if he was to be re-elected, the most important topics on his agenda would be to first address COVID-19 and to second address public safety concerns in Billings.
We need to focus on public safety. Billings has a crime problem. Our crime rate has doubled in the last 10 years, and we need additional resources, but we also need to use the resources that we've got even better than we are. And working together, I think we can accomplish all those things.
Reporting in Billings, I'm Shaquille Cozart with MTN News.
Thanks, Shaquille. Now, along with Mayor Cole, multiple other council members will be up for re-election or termed out. Mike Yakowicz and Sean Brown are termed out. Well, Frank Walt, Denise Joy, and Penny Ronning are still in their first terms. The deadline to file for re-election is June 21st, with the election being held on November 2nd. After an emotional debate, the state Senate today endorsed a bill barring businesses or government from making vaccinations a condition of employment or receiving services. That bill is now just a few votes away from going to Governor Greg Gianforte for his signature into law. The Senate endorsed the bill on a 31-19 straight party line vote with Republicans in favor. The bill says businesses cannot make vaccinations a condition of employment and that no person or government can deny services to anyone based on their vaccination status. Opponents of the bill said the law would run afoul of federal regulations, or could, for nursing homes or assisted living facilities with vulnerable populations. Supporters of the bill erupted in cheers when the bill passed. That prompted the Senate chair for day, Senate Carl Glimm of Kalispell, to bang his gavel and ask for decorum. Republican Senator Tom McGilvray of Billings carried the bill on the floor and said that thousands of people had contacted the legislature saying they feared for their jobs if they didn't want to get vaccinated.
This is the foot in the door. The camel's nose under the tent, the foot in the door. This is the opportunity to not just have vaccine status on a passport, but your religious preference, your political identity, what you believe, what you think. This is just the beginning, and this is why this bill is so critical and important today. This is just the beginning of the invasion of our privacy and our fundamental constitutional rights.
That bill would not apply to vaccination requirements at schools or daycare centers. Also in Helena's Day, Montana leaders gathered to mark their continued efforts to address the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous people. MTN's Jonathan Ambarian reports on the latest steps that the state is taking.
On Thursday, Governor Greg Gianforte held a ceremony to mark the signing of a suite of bills aimed at showing Montana's continued commitment to continuing the dialogue about how to deal with what has been called an epidemic.
The missing and murdered Indigenous persons crisis has tragically impacted far too many families in Montana. And let me be clear, it must end.
Gianforte signed Senate Bill 4 into law on Thursday. Earlier in the week, he signed House Bills 35 and 98. Among those in attendance Thursday were the family of Selena Not Afraid, a 16-year-old girl from Hardin whose body was found last year, several weeks after she went missing. Selena's aunt, Cheryl Horn, has become a prominent activist for missing women.
We're here because of not just Selena, but Selena told me, don't stop, because there's other girls standing behind me.
SB 4 from Senator Jason Small of Busby extended Montana's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Task Force for another 2 years.
What was one of the great aspects of the task force itself was there were a lot of meetings. There was huge community buy-in, and it kept the light on. You know, it kept people talking.
Representative Sharon Stewart Paragoy of Crow Agency brought the other 2 bills. HB 98 also extended the Looping In Native Communities grants to set up a portal for reporting missing Indigenous people. HB 35 will set up a commission to confidentially review missing persons cases.
It's important as Montanans to come together and to be able to ensure that our young women, our young men, our people are safe, our children are safe.
One thing that everyone at Thursday's ceremony agreed on, these bills are only a first step, and there's still a lot of work to do, particularly at the community level. In Helena, Jonathan Amberian, MTN News.
All 3 of these bills passed the legislature with wide bipartisan support. Well, tonight we take a look back at an infamous chapter of Montana history. They were known as the Montana Freeman, and 25 years ago they would put the spotlight on Montana for a long, bizarre armed standoff with FBI agents that would drag on for months. For almost 2 years, the Freeman had refused to be evicted from the secluded 960-acre ranch near Jordan.
Looking back on it, I wished I'd had a lot more sympathy for the people in the Jordan area and what they had endured even before the international media spotlight started to shine on Jordan.
It was just strange stuff. That was the first time I brushed right up against that. I had no frame of reference on it.
They called it Justice Township and had their own interpretation of the law, rejecting the authority of the federal government and using bogus checks and other fraudulent means to heavily arm themselves.
The Bible is the only true law. Men make rules. God made the law.
A couple of years of threats against a judge, false liens being put on people's properties. How much more of that did people have to take? And then all of a sudden the international media spotlight. That must have been really hard.
When the group's leader, Leroy Schweitzer, and 2 others were arrested, it became the lead story on the CBS Evening News.
Federal agents move in Montana, their first major crackdown on fugitive armed militia members since the deadly siege at Ruby Ridge, Idaho.
Meanwhile, back on the ranch, about a dozen Freemen and their followers were holed up, claiming they were on sovereign territory.
There was this not a foreboding, but something more than an urgency, because we didn't know what was going to happen next.
The Freemen showed their displeasure with the outside world today by hoisting an American flag upside down outside their ranch house.
We're the conservators of the peace. We don't want to destroy the law, and you've heard lots of things, anti-government, that type of thing.
The FBI moved in black armored cars and a rescue helicopter to Garfield County today.
A concern for violence, a lot of concern of outsiders coming in. I think that in talking to FBI agents, that was one of their biggest fears was outside instigators making the situation worse.
While the FBI moved in force, they were in no hurry, willing to wait it out and avoid another violent confrontation.
I felt for the FBI guys because they're standing out there on roads, with enough armament on them to take over a small country. And just this raw wind. And
then that weather, goodness, that weather was hard.
I remember talking with one of them and I said, you must wish these guys would hole up in Hawaii sometime. He laughed through gritted teeth.
Everybody was not happy for the cameras or the influx of law enforcement as well. The FBI and ATF, making a presence in Montana in the mid-90s wasn't well received by some.
81 days later, the standoff finally ended peacefully when the remaining Freemen surrendered.
It's apparently all over but the shouting and the trip to jail. Nearly 3 months after it began, the standoff between the anti-government Freeman and federal agents is in its last hours.
That was fascinating stuff. I've never covered anything remotely like that story. There were some similarities to now, although not to the same degree, but there was a real anger.
I wish I had realized at the time just how pervasive some of this thought was and where it was going to go. Because even today, we're dealing with people who really are kind of tied loosely, if not actually tied through connections. They're tied philosophically to some of the Freemen. So we're still dealing with some of their philosophies today.
Well, the trial for the Freeman was also a spectacle, bringing national news cameras back to Montana again. The leader of the group, Larry Schweitzer, was convicted on multiple federal charges and died in prison in 2011 at the age of 73. 7 others were also convicted and sentenced, with the last of the imprisoned Freeman, Russell Landers, who you saw in that video, passing away just last week. Well, up next on tonight's MTN 530 News here on Q2, what began in 1970 is now celebrated by more than 193 countries. We'll take you to the Magic City Earth Day celebration next. And then a little later in sports, from Japan to California and now Lavina, we'll meet one Montana athlete who always travels the distance in more ways than one. Scott will explain in just a bit.
Doppler radar starting to light up a little bit more in the last short while, but a lot of that moisture not able to make it to the ground because of wind. We'll step you through this cold front passing through with the forecast coming up.